She's a girl who lived life as an adventure, exploring the wilderness of the West.
My life, can I just say, this is me showing gratitude.
But now authorities are trying to understand how she died. And it, at this point, is a complete mystery. Her body was found on a California hiking trail. I'll tell you what those who say they found her are revealing about the state of her body, and it is setting off some deeply unsettling questions. We're on The Case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. All right, hey guys, real quick, we have a lot to get to in this episode of On The Case, but before we start that, I want to tell you about this app. It's huge. It's called Upside, and it gets you cash back on everyday purchases like gas, groceries, and takeout. Here's what you do. It's super easy. You download Upside for free. You claim an offer at one of their 100,000 plus locations. Then you pay like you typically would with your card. Then you verify the purchase and you get money back. That's it. I've used it. Say I get gas or takeout. I search for offers on Upside. Then after I spend, money appears in my app. I just transfer it straight to my bank. Upside's frequent users earn an average of $254 back a year. So to start getting your cash back, click the link in the description or scan the QR code and use promo code OTC to get an extra 25 cents bonus on every gallon on your first tank of gas. We are following a big twist in a story that is really hard to make sense of. How a woman who seemed fit, seemed to be living life to the fullest, seemed to have a positive impact on so many people would wind up dead, like the woman we're talking about in this story out of California.
Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That is my new motto, because basically I wake up ready to charge like the second my eyes open.
That is Joanna Shields talking to her followers on Instagram. Her username was JoJo Skates, and this was when she was just taking a moment to talk to her followers and show some gratitude. Shields was from Carlsbad, California, but she explored so many different places. She loved to skateboard, and she actually seemed to work for a company that makes electric skateboards. It was a big part of who she was. Her social media shows her as someone who loved the outdoors, loved to go for adventures. She described herself as someone who was doing her best to be her best. There's a GoFundMe that's raising money for her family that says that she moved through the world with brightness and spontaneity. And again, knowing that about her makes this story just so difficult to comprehend. So I want to talk about what we know at this point related to how Joanna Shields died. And this was on April 9th. This story takes place in Big Sur, California, which is just a picturesque part of the country. It is home to some of the most scenic hiking trails that you will find anywhere on Earth. According to KSBW television, there were a group of hikers that were going through what's called Sykes Hot Springs in Los Padres National Forest in Big Sur, and that's when they came across a body. And it was the body of Joanna Shields. Now, one of those hikers told the television station, quote, "I didn't see any blood. She was pale. She had markings around her neck. I don't want to say, choking marks, but when the firefighter lifted the jacket, he confirmed that she had a big gash on her head," end quote. So her body was found on April 9th. And her body, because of some of the weather conditions and just the remote location of where she was, it wasn't recovered until the next day on the 10th. Authorities actually needed a helicopter to help get Joanna's body out of that national forest because of where she was located. Now, those hikers who spoke to the television station, not only did they say they found a body, but this was a very interesting part. They also say there was a person there who said they were a friend of Joanna. Now, the hikers told the TV station that this man, he claimed to be her friend, and they say that he looked, quote, nervous, like shocked, his face just like numb and dull. So when you hear that, it definitely grabs your attention, maybe raises the alarm a bit about what type of story we may be dealing with here. Now, Joanna's alleged friend who was talking to these hikers said that Joanna had gone to the bathroom. A hiker said, quote, "She was cleaning herself off in the river around 10:30 a.m. and he went looking for her and then just saw her face down in the water naked," end quote. Now, the hikers said that they gave statements to the authorities as well. They didn't just talk to the media. And we know that investigators in this case have called the death of Joanna Shields suspicious. But at this point, we still don't know how she died. Now, the hiker who witnessed all of this reportedly said, quote, "On one hand, we didn't know if he was just having the worst day of his life, or on the other, like he had just killed someone. So I just went in with, like, all right, just be ultra cautious, slow things down, and make sure everyone's safe." Now, police have not said whether they believe Joanna's death to be a homicide or the result of foul play, but they haven't ruled anything out at this point. Investigators are still trying to piece together exactly what happened to Joanna, and raising even more questions is the result of her autopsy. Investigators were not able to determine Joanna's cause of death. Now, investigators were able to determine the marks on her neck that you heard those hikers talking about. They were worried that they might have been the result of her being choked. Authorities have ruled out those marks being the result of strangulation or foul play. The coroner reportedly actually said that those injuries were consistent with those caused by insects. And we'll talk a little bit more about how that factors into the timeline of what happened to this woman, knowing that whatever the marks were on her neck, which, we haven't seen pictures of them, that they were the result of insects in this forest. Now, KSBW says that investigators are still calling Joanna's death suspicious, and they have not ruled out foul play. Now, authorities are still waiting on a toxicology test to come back to show us what was in Joanna's system at her time of death. The thing is, could take 6 to 8 weeks, reportedly, to get the results of that.
This is my life. This is what I mean. I am so grateful to be alive, and there have been points in my life that, I came close to not being alive, and that wasn't a conscious choice.
Now, on the Instagram live that we watched that Joanna Shields posted, and she talked really about so much positivity, so much gratefulness. She also talked about having mental health struggles in her past. There's another video that's posted to YouTube where she talks about dealing with depression and anxiety and fighting to get back to a good place. Now, the GoFundMe for Joanna says, quote, "She belonged to the wind and the sunshine, often gliding by on her skateboard with a smile that brightened her gorgeous blue eyes. Joanna was a bright and adventurous spirit who touched the lives of everyone around her." Join us now to talk more about this case, and it's just, it's very tragic, very sad when you think of the loss of someone who just seemed to be living such a vibrant life, but such a mystery as well. Matt Irvine, retired detective, law enforcement instructor. It's always great to have you here, on Law and Crime. What stands out to you at this point about, especially now that the autopsy has come back and that seems to be inconclusive in determining what happened to Joanna Shields?
Well, it's still very much a mystery, as you said. And I think what stands out to me is that the Monterey Sheriff's Department seems to be doing exactly what they should be doing in terms of best practices and good police work, which is whenever you have what we call an unattended death, that is where somebody dies and there isn't a credible, neutral third party around to tell you what happened, you treat it as a crime until the facts show it to be otherwise. And so they seem to be proceeding exactly as they should be, and very cautiously, because when you start leaping to assumptions and decide that something is accidental or natural before all the facts are in, you miss things, evidence gets lost, it gets contaminated, and it's very hard to undo those missteps later in the investigation. So the fact that they're proceeding cautiously and kind of keeping this as an open question seems to me absolutely the right thing to be doing at this time.
Well, and you look at the autopsy comes back and it's inconclusive in terms of her cause of death, but there was a big piece of information that came out because you have these hikers who say that they found her body and they talked about marks on her neck. And when you hear that on the outside, you worry that this is a person who was attacked, that maybe they were choked or strangled. But police say that's not the case. They say that it looks like those, and we haven't seen pictures of these markings, who knows what they look like, but he says they were the markings of bugs, which, could be a lot of things. I know ants were speculated. I've never heard of that. What do you make of that part of it? Again, we don't know what these markings look like. So it could be something we see it and we're like, well, clearly that's what it is. But what do you think?
Well, I certainly don't know a whole lot about ants and bugs specifically in this case, but definitely when somebody dies for any reason in an exposed environment, and particularly in this very kind of rugged nature area around Big Sur, it's uh, going to be common that there's some kind of animal activity involved with the body. And so that's not unusual. It's also not unusual for a person to die accidentally or from natural causes, and for it to still look pretty gruesome to a bystander, to a passerby. So none of that is all that surprising. I imagine that the medical examiner and the police are looking very carefully at Ms. Shields' remains for any signs of trauma that are not consistent with a fall or other kind of natural causes based on the circumstances. I imagine they're looking very carefully at the area where she was found to determine if the evidence indicates that this is where she died, or if there's any evidence that she was brought there after she died. And that might be things like organic material that's not native to the area. It might be something like drag marks. In a case where somebody has a lot of bleeding, if there's not a lot of blood at the place where they're found, obviously that indicates that they died somewhere else. And I'm sure they're looking very carefully at her background. Anything that she might have said to somebody before this incident that suggested she intended harm to herself, any persons in her life that she was afraid of or felt threatened by. Unfortunately, when women are killed, unless they're involved in activities that put them in contact with a lot of dangerous strangers, overwhelmingly, they are killed by intimate partners or former intimate partners. So I'm sure those are all aspects of the investigation. They're going to be looking at her remains, they're going to be looking at the place where she was found, and they're going to be looking at the people in her life to figure out if any of that can tell them what happened here.
So you had these hikers, and they end up giving an interview to a local television station, and that's where we get, some of the information, it seems, look into the investigation and what's ongoing. And not only did they talk about finding her body, but they talk about this person who said they were a friend of hers who was out apparently hiking with her, they claimed. And this person, it's hard because it's from the perspective of these hikers. You kind of have a picture in your mind of what this person is like. We haven't seen them, but they say this person was acting nervous, and then they find Joanna Shields' body. And then I guess they had called for help. As an investigator, when you approach someone like this, whether it's this friend, and maybe they were out backpacking and there's an accident that happened and that explains everything away, but until we get to that point, how do you kind of take this person and try and understand what happened?
Well, speaking first to the hikers, I'm not at all surprised that they are overwhelmed by what they saw and reading into it probably all the kind of worst possibilities. To come across a dead body is traumatic. Again, a person who dies even under the most natural circumstances can be a pretty gruesome and difficult thing to witness. So they may be kind of filling in pieces based on their own emotional response, and maybe based on things that they are, getting from true crime stories, movies, TV, that kind of thing. As far as the person who may have been with her at the time, I mean, that is obviously going to be a critical source of information in this case. Again, even if she died in the most accidental and natural, tragic way, that person is going to be emotionally affected by it, especially if they're close to her. And so for that person to be nervous or traumatized, it is not any kind of indicator of guilt necessarily. But certainly what they have to tell the investigation is going to be critical.
It's important to note, law enforcement, the sheriff's office there in Monterey County, they have labeled this death suspicious. It's mysterious for sure, but this hasn't been labeled a murder. We don't know if foul play is involved. Foul play also hasn't been ruled out as of yet. So we're kind of in this, holding area as we're waiting for this to go through. What's the process, though, of getting to the point where as a team, you look and say, okay, this was accidental, or this is something where we believe we're going down this path that we do believe foul play was involved?
Well, again, it's those kind of three prongs that we talked about a moment ago. It's going to be evidence that Ms. Shields' body tells, the story that it tells to the investigators in terms of any trauma that is inconsistent with accident or natural causes. It's going to be the scene where she's found. Any indication that she died elsewhere and was brought there is certainly going to be suspicious. And then obviously, again, talking to witnesses, the hiker and the person who, the hikers and the person who apparently was with her at or around the time that she suffered whatever it was that ended her life. Those are going to be critical sources of information, but also people in her life more broadly prior to this incident. Anything that she told to people about her plans for this hike, her plans for her life, anybody that she felt threatened or afraid of, any relationship she was in that might have posed some harm to her. All of those are going to be aspects of this investigation. And again, they're proceeding exactly as they should be. An unattended death like this is suspicious and should be treated like a crime until proven otherwise.
Think of the area where her body was found as well. These are like hot springs, I guess, but it's, deep enough into this national forest where they needed a helicopter when they were recovering her body, which is probably not uncommon for Big Sur and, in a hiking situation. But, her body being found in water and, the conditions around it, I just wonder, like, how do you collect evidence in a scene like that where, it's certainly the being in water part, but then just kind of the elements around her?
Well, you're making a couple important points here. I mean, first of all, yes, the area where she was found is very remote. It's very rugged. It's kind of looking up this trail that she was nearby, and it's posted for hikers as being something that is very challenging, very steep, very rugged. So it's certainly the kind of place where you could suffer a fall or an accident that could really injure or kill you. So in some ways, that leans more towards the natural or accidental explanation. But as to working the scene, I mean, water is tough to work with because it does degrade things. It can remove things. There's also things in water that then attach. So it is a tricky medium, but there are people who spend their entire careers developing expertise in this area, and it should be a workable scene nonetheless.
What does it tell you that the autopsy came back inconclusive in terms of determining that cause of death?
Well, it's a great question. And again, I haven't seen it, so I don't know the details, but I would expect what that indicates is that there is nothing obvious in terms of the trauma that her body suffered that is indicative of some kind of violent act against her. That is, if she's got, let's say a head injury, that could be caused by any number of things, both accidental and intentional. And if that's the nature of the story that her body is telling us at this point, it doesn't really answer the question of how the mechanism by which that injury was sustained.
And then I know they're waiting on the toxicology test to come back. And I think everybody watching this knows, like, a toxicology test will show you what potentially was in her body at the time. But I mean, how likely is it that there will be that answer to a cause of death coming from a toxicology test, as opposed to the autopsy, which wasn't able to figure that out?
That's an excellent question. It's really hard to say. I don't know what kind of substances, she would be voluntarily ingesting on any kind of regular basis. I don't know anything about her lifestyle, any kind of medication or anything else that she was taking. I mean, certainly if you're hiking out in a remote and rugged area, certain substances, both legal and illegal, can cause disorientation, dehydration, overheating, all of which could be very, very dangerous for somebody, out in a rugged and remote wilderness area. So there may be some answers there, but not knowing anything about sort of her life and what medications or substances she would be ingesting, it's really hard to say how informative the toxicology is going to be. There's also some substances that leave the body very quickly, some that are, found in hair, others in blood, others in tissue. So it's hard to know what they would be testing for and what information may still be available to them.
Yeah, because I kind of going back to where her body was found and just kind of this rugged area, certainly if she was down in water, you just think of how hard it is to, the evidence. Even I think her body was found April 9th and they weren't able to get it out of the forest until the 10th because of some tough weather conditions, what type of impact that will have. I know they've said the toxicology test takes like 6 to 8 weeks. And I know in a lot of parts of the country, there can be a backlog and it can take some time to get those results. As you're waiting, like on a case, and I know this is a unique case, but as you're waiting for those results to come back, and you already have the autopsy that's inconclusive, like as a detective on this case, like what are you doing kind of in the meantime as that waiting period goes on? Is there really anything you can do, until you have
Absolutely.
that
I mean,
report come back?
yeah, this is the time where witness interviews are going to be really important. Again, we talked about the hikers that found her and the individual that may have been with her at or near the time of her death, but they should be talking to people in her life to figure out, is there any person, any reason that somebody would want to harm her? And again, unfortunately, in many cases with women, it's an intimate partner or former intimate partner, unless she's involved in some kind of activity that puts her around dangerous people. And I don't think there's any indication publicly that that's part of her life. But yeah, those witness interviews, family, friends, associates, partners, former partners, all of that can be going on now while they are waiting for the results of the toxicology.
And we'll see what happens next. Just very sad when you think of the loss of course, the loss of life, but such a mystery, playing out in Big Sur, and hopefully we'll have some answers, especially for the family and the friends of this young woman. Matt Irvine, law enforcement instructor, retired detective. Always great to have you on Law and Crime and breaking down these cases with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we're also streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.